Hey, how's it going? Coach Kyle here. So, if you want to make some super easy, super tasty, totally vegan, it might always be vegan, sourdough, you're in the right spot. So, this recipe, these instructions are based on, if you Google, if you YouTube, like easiest sourdough recipe, this is based on that video and that blog post. But I think my video is easier to follow along with, and I think my process is slightly better. So I've gone through some different versions of this, and I think I'm nailing it. But I'm no expert. I just know that I enjoy making and I enjoy eating sourdough, and it tastes pretty good. So, like I said though, I'm no expert. I want you to go down into the comments of this video if you have any suggestions on how I can further improve upon this process, so me and others can improve upon the process. Leave comments, leave constructive criticism below. If you have any questions, leave some questions below. If you have answers to questions, leave some answers below. Help each other out. Help everybody out so we can make the best sourdough, because it's really good. But I think sourdough gets a bad rap in being this really hard, complex process, when as you watch this video, it's not that hard. It sits a lot. But as for the actual process, the making of the sourdough, it's not that complicated. So stay tuned, pay attention, and enjoy the sourdough. If you make some and you have any suggestions, again, please let me know. I'm all ears. So let's get into the video. So first off, what we do is we take 50 grams of starter, and for all this equipment, the links to purchase these are in the description of this video. I tried to do it with, not getting the scale and the dough scraper, and I tried it without a cast iron skillet. And trust me, just get the good stuff right off the bat. It makes it so much easier. So again, I'm making 2 loaves here. So here's 50 more grams of starter to start us off. And then next up, we're going to add 350 grams of water into each of these, and just pouring it in there. I don't know if it matters if it's warm or cold. I just used kind of lukewarm water, and we're going to go up to 350 grams, and then mix that in with a spatula into both of these. And then next up, we're going to add 10 grams of salt into each of these. And then now that the salt is added, we're going to add some flour. And I used 95 grams of whole wheat flour and 380 grams of regular bread flour. And the one thing I probably would have done differently here is mixed the 2 flours together in their own separate bowls. But since I was using my 2 largest mixing bowls here, I didn't do that. But that's one thing I would recommend doing, is mix the flours and the salt together in a separate bowl, and then put them together over the water and the starter so they're mixed in a little better. And at that point, you just kind of, next up you'll see, we're going to kind of just mix them together with our fingers. And like I said, if I were to do this differently, and I wasn't really thinking, I would have mixed the dry ingredients together first. But one thing that I really struggled with early on was the absolute stickiness of this. And I think that it shouldn't quite be this sticky. So one thing that I've seen is if it's super sticky, there are a couple different options that you can do to maybe improve upon this or reduce the stickiness in the future. So I'm not going to go into too much detail with that because, you know, you can Google it yourself and you're going to see a bunch of different replies and thoughts and suggestions from gluten development to the starter to etc., etc. And you really just got to see which one works best for you. But I've really come to figure out that to get the stickiness off my fingers and off the bowl, as you'll see, I use this little tiny scraper. So yeah, you can see it gets pretty sticky, and I'm sure eventually, hopefully, I've kind of find a way to solve this a little bit. Oh, and I use the face mask up there to keep flies from getting out of the top of the starter. You can see I kind of cut the holes a little big to let the starter breathe in the lid right there. So I caught some fruit flies checking it out, so I put the mask over top. But here you can see that I use this little scraper to get it off my fingers, and that does the trick. And I use the scraper to get it off the sides of the bowl as well, because I really had a lot of problem kind of figuring out how to clean this sticky off when doing the dishes and everything too. So next up, what we do is once we get those mixed all together, we take a damp cloth and drape the damp cloth over the top of the bowl to let the starter rise. And what I typically do is I feed the starter the night before, let it sit on the countertop, and then in the morning, this is what I do first thing in the morning. So it sits around a lot. It sits overnight after you feed it, and here it'll sit in the front window of the living room throughout the entire day to rise. And so it's, you know, kind of labor intensive, but on the other side, it's not really that much work because it's sitting most of the time. Most of the time when I'm actually working with it, I'm just mixing it up like I am here, and it's gonna go sit on the counter. I think I put it in the kitchen over here for first because it'll get some sun here in the morning. It didn't get that much and didn't really rise too much, and I moved it up into the warmer big window up front in the living room. And when it roughly doubles in size, it's good to go for the next step. So you can see that it was kind of a godsend when I realized to do this, because the first few times I did this dough that was stuck to the bowl here, I had to wash off somehow, and it was a nightmare. So forgive the dirty sink there. So here we're using the dough scraper, and this dough scraper is awesome. Really love it. Really good purchase. And again, any of the equipment I have here, you can check out the links in the description. But this was a game changer. I love this thing here. Definitely recommend getting it. And what we're doing is we're really just kind of making the surface of it tighter to give it a good kind of tight, you know, outer skin, outer layer there. So now what I'm trying to do here, and honestly failing at, is getting it into a tight ball. And I'm not sure how I could do this a little better, but I hope to figure it out. So what we're doing now is taking this preheated 500 degree for an hour preheat, take it out. I tried parchment paper. Parchment paper, not a fan, but I found that sprinkling in some flour on the bottom is perfect. As long as, of course, it doesn't touch the sides, which it doesn't. But I tried parchment paper, didn't like it. It just burns and it still sticks to the dough. Here, one thing I could have done better, you'll see that I'm going to try to flop it into the Dutch oven, and what I could have done is maybe just put some flour on my left hand there, and it wouldn't have stuck to my left hand at all, but I did get some sticky on it. But if you have any tips on how I can kind of get the dough a little more taut, less sticky before I put it in here, and I couldn't even cut it very well because it's so sticky. So any tips on that for me, I would really appreciate. Yep, let's not touch it without the... See, I've got some I've got some dough stuck to my hand. So I should have either put a little bit of water or some flour on my palm there and it would have been fine. But we're going to stick that in there. And I'm still a little... You can see that my first loaf there got a little toasty. So the original recipe for this is 500 degrees for 30 minutes. 20 minutes with the lid on, and then 25 to 30 minutes, 25 minutes to 30 minutes with the lid off down to 450 degrees. And that just, it gets, the top is too hot. So what I did here for the second loaf is, I think I did 30 minutes at 500 and then 20 minutes with the oven off with no lid, and that came out perfect. Check that bad boy out. So that's probably what I'm going to do for the next few loaves is 30 minutes. I'm trying to get all this flour off the bottom. 30 minutes with the lid on at 500, and then 15-20 minutes or so lid off, oven off. So it's just gradually cooling down. But you know, you put it back in there, it's at 500 with the oven off, and it turned out perfectly. And even this one here was a little toasted up top, but still tastes great. And I gave the other one away, kept this one for myself. I definitely recommend keeping it in some sort of plastic bag. We use reusable plastic bags. It will prevent the crust from getting too hard at the same time. It leaves it nice and soft. I think that looks great, by the way. It looks just like the picture from the Food Geek website, by the way, so I think I nailed it. And sort of what we do pretty much every time I make a loaf is cut off an end, put some vegan butter on it, and give it a little taste test. So again, thoughts, suggestions, comments, questions, please drop them below.
That is so yummy. Yep. It's a pretty good loaf of bread. So easy. So tasty.